I forgot to change the background from my previous video, actually talking about one of the polls. So let me do that real quick. This is awkward. This is awkward. Where is this palace anyways? Is this in Russia? I guess it's either Russia or Britain somewhere. Check it out as I just float back away into a ghost. I'm still here. Now that I've got that out of the way, today I'm going to be watching and reacting to 4 ways British and American houses are very different. This is from Lost in the Pond. He currently lives in the US, and I think it's been about 10 years now since he's lived here, but he's originally from Britain. We did 2 recently with him. One of the comparison between US and British pubs. Big difference. Spoiler alert. Big difference. Americans are kind of a joke, and British pubs are the real thing. They're legit. They're way better. And I'm finding out from the comments, you practically have 1 million every square mile. Our pint size is different. It's actually smaller. And what I got from the comments as well is that it's hard to determine what the truly oldest pub is around the UK. And the second more relevant video that I did of his is bedrooms. The differences between British and American bedrooms. So we're expanding that view, and we are watching 4 ways British and American houses are very different.
And tea drinkers that we are, we love our kettles, don't we? But they're not just any kettles, these are ones you plug in and then hit the switch to turn on the plug, because I forgot to mention that our plug sockets also have switches.
Good start.
Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to houses, the things we live inside. If you're watching this video, it's quite likely you're either inside a house right now, or you're near one, because otherwise you wouldn't probably have internet access quite as easily. To anyone that might be new to this channel, come on in, get yourself a cup of tea. This isn't a genuine offer to come into my house. I'm just saying, join the channel, this is good. And hello to everybody who's been here a long time. Today we're going to look at several ways in which British and American houses are very, very different. Having lived in the United States for over 11 years, I've lived in my fair share of houses here, just as I did in Britain. So I think I have a decent grasp of how houses work. Even tiny ones like this one, which is about 400 square feet. I'm joking, this is a professional studio. Don't question me. And so without further ado, let's take a look at 4 ways that British and American houses are very, very different.
I'm excited, let's do this.
Neither Britain nor America is devoid of variety when it comes to their housing styles, and that's because, well, with each sort of passing phase of history comes new designs to meet new needs and just new style preferences. And because of this variety, I'm not going to cover every single one of them, because that would keep us all here until next Wednesday, which would be good for my metrics, but not good for your sanity. So let's take a look at how some of the housing styles do vary from country to country. In Britain, a lot of the distinctive styles are also tied up with the period in which they were built. So you could go all the way back to the Tudor period, and you do find Tudor housing dotted around here and there. In fact, if you go to the city of York, for example, there's quite a lot of sort of Tudor buildings there. They're quite ornate with wood paneling, and they're the sort of place that you might imagine that Shakespeare lived. But wood is less indicative of British houses than you would see in America, where wood is actually quite a common material for building houses.
The Tudor houses do seem pretty old school to us, and a huge reason why we love traveling abroad. You actually have towns full of these buildings, these styles of homes from different periods throughout history, which we don't really have that here all too much. I mean, we only go back so far. And yes, made of wood? Yeah, this whole house that I'm currently in is made of wood frame, and there's a lot of restrictions here where I am, whereby, of course, the San Andreas Fault. I don't know how popular that is around the world and in the UK, if it's known, but one of the largest fault lines in the world apparently runs straight through California along this beautiful Pacific Rim we're in. So there's these codes you have to be built with, like there's no brick buildings. That's probably highly illegal here. It's all made of wood frames and everything. I probably feel 1 a year, I guess. Sometimes you'll feel 2 or 3 in a year. Yeah, wood frames everywhere, wood everywhere.
In Britain, from about the Georgian period onward, you were going to see quite a lot of brickwork. Georgian period houses absolutely exist. People live in them, but they tend to be these opulent-looking houses that have notable pops of white rectangle, which are just the windows. Essentially, it's very nice. They look
nice.
like dolls' houses that you should live in.
They do
but then
as
come
well.
the Victorian age, we started moving toward these sort of like orangey brick buildings, right? And a lot of them were terraced houses, which is what Americans would call row houses. And they just look very industrial, right? You could imagine a chimney sweep going up
Still
and
very
getting his
nice
face
looking.
covered in soot. And then we move into the Edwardian period, where houses are sort of similar to those of the Victorian age. They're just lighter colours with more chimney sweeps, if Mary Poppins is anything to go by. Now, during World War II, when the Nazis bombed the ever-loving crap out of us, a lot of the houses went boom. And then after World War II, there was a housing boom. And you started to see a build-up of new, more simple houses, kind of like the one I grew up in. Now, that's a castle. That didn't happen. But I grew up in something more like this. That's not...
This is the house style. Was like the Airbnb that we stayed in 2018 when I was in London. I was fairly close to Putney Station. I don't know if that's a well-known station there, but I was near East Putney. And this was kind of the style of home. I don't know if it was brick though, or at least this much brick.
Not Lawrence's actual house. Despite what fairy tales may suggest, most of us have never lived in a chocolate box house, but those do exist. A chocolate box house is the kind of house you might see in the Cotswolds, right? It's very quaint looking, it's got thatch roofing, and it looks like this. And if, like me, you're wondering why it's called a chocolate box house, yet it doesn't look edible, it goes back to the 1950s/60s when chocolate boxes would have on their facade a kind of depiction of a beautiful English countryside. And these types of houses would often feature on said box. Now again, this is by no means an entire repository of British houses. Neither is the following an entire repository of American houses. It's just the more common ones that you will see when you are here. So Cape Cod houses, you know these types of houses, right? They're the ones with the wood paneling down the side. And I said a moment ago that, you know, America makes good use of wood in this country because there's just so much of it. So many woodlands around the country, and it's a huge country from which to pull that resource. So they do, and it's cheap. But funnily enough, the Cape Cod style has its history with English settlers who came here in the 17th century and started building Cape Cod style houses in New England. Now, during the post-World War II period, partly to provide, you know, housing to veterans coming back from war, there was a revival of Cape Cod style housing, and it started to be built not just in New England, but all along the East Coast and in the Midwest, and even out west. Anybody that's seen the Goonies will know that. And it was this style of housing that I first moved into when I moved to the United States. And I've got to say, even despite the Midwest winters, it was really warm. You know, you'd think it would be quite drafty because of all of the gaps in the wood. You could go to specific streets or neighborhoods or areas of the United States and only find these houses for miles and miles. So I lived in one of those, but my grandparents-in-law lived in what is known as a ranch-style house. And these are sort of really low-down buildings, don't typically have two floors to them. And once again, these houses became popular after World War II. There was just generally a big sort of boom after...
Yes, this is huge. This is what my grandparents lived in. One of these style, like these ranch homes, are kind of lower, one story, really wide, a lot to them. They're nice, they're good, they're quaint. And that's very true. There's huge pockets of these style of homes around the US. After World War II, they exploded with these. I feel like my grandparents' one was made in, I don't know, the 50s, 53 or so, here out in California. Very popular, very popular.
To World War II, again in the United States in that regard. The 20th century, though, did see more and more revivalism of old styles. So you had, you know, mock Tudor, or should I say revival Tudor, which more or less replicated the kind of Tudor buildings that you would see in England with some differences. And I've seen those types of buildings in Boston, for example. I've also seen them in Indiana. As well as that, the 20th century saw colonial revivalism, though most people don't live in those houses. Maybe one day when I get that grand piano, I'll think about it. And so that's an extremely basic and rudimentary breakdown of some of the different styles that you'll see in each country. But there's one big difference between all of the houses in both countries, and it's this. Let's face it, it's time to face up to some home truths. Compared to America, Britain is microscopic. The United States is absolutely massive and needs to be stopped. And the same is true of each country's average house size. Right, so in the United States, houses just tend to be way more spacious. And we're not just talking about millionaire houses here, we're talking about your average house. So the average size of an American single-family home is approximately 1,600 square feet. In the UK, we're looking at an average of about 900 square feet. So Why the difference? Well, one reason is population density. In Britain, we're all a bit packed together. Actually, that partially accounts for why everything is smaller in Britain. Not everything, not the cups. But in America, there's just so much land, and relative to that land, so few people. So, make them as large as you want, and they do. They're huge. But also
This is kind of on topic, but even driving out from California to the desert, just say I go to Arizona or Nevada, like Las Vegas or Phoenix, Arizona, you'll be driving hours and hours just through desert. There's nothing out there. There's no soul within hundreds of miles sometimes. And when you look at a map, maybe I'll throw one on here at night, especially, you have the globe map and you see the US or just sections of the world. It's really not overly populated on the West Coast. Like, cut America in half. The west side of the US is so dark and black, and no one's living in most of the mass majority of the US. But when you go to the East Coast side or the east side of the US, and there's lights and cities everywhere. It's all connected, weaving in and out. It's like the spider web of homes and buildings, cities, land. It's incredible to see. So there's a pretty stark difference between the two. There's an incredible amount of just empty land around here.
A large majority of American houses are relatively new, meaning that they were able to benefit from, building methods and materials that other countries like Britain were not. And the post-war expansion of American highways meant that this was enhanced even more. Those materials could be moved around the country more easily, and of course this ushered in a more grand housing development. Now, all size aside, try saying that after 10 tepid tequilas, things become subtly different once you're inside the houses of either country. Is gadgets the right word? I don't know. I'll have to fire my graphics team. Either way, we're essentially talking about accessories, the things you have in your house that make that house work, even when you're doing the house work. So, for example, airflow, right? America's bigger on its overhead fans and air conditioning units. We don't usually use those. I
actually have the air... Maybe you'll hate me. I have the air conditioning going and a ceiling fan above me going right now. It's not overly hot. It's 90 degrees right now Fahrenheit. I think that's 32 degrees Celsius. And I turned off the air conditioning for recording because I don't want this loud noise behind me. Ceiling fan's still on.
We like to punish ourselves, especially in the summer, but we can crack a window open and it doesn't get oppressively hot, always. And so we've mostly been fine with this situation. It does mean that insects get in, so daddy longlegs will get in the house and mosquitoes, but it's a small price to pay for not having air conditioning. I actually quite like air conditioning now that I've lived in the US. Speaking of insects, you also don't see in Britain those insect screens that you put in the windows, hence why they're getting in. In America, they're virtually in every house, but then again, in Britain, we don't have black widows or brown recluses or the types of mosquitoes that make your face go like this. So I can see why it's justified. You still get ants, or is that just me? Not sure how they get in, maybe cracks in the wall, or maybe through the plug sockets. The plug sockets, of course, are different in both countries too. In Britain, you have the three-pronged outlets, and in America, you sometimes have three, but occasionally two.
As for the screens, I'm surprised. You grow up with screens. There's never, I feel like, homes without screens on a door and window. We have screens everywhere. There are mosquitoes here. I do currently have bites from mosquitoes on my ankles. It's hard to imagine homes without screens, at least around where I grew up.
And they're smaller in America than they are in Britain. That's one of the few things about which you can say that. Separate taps, of course, for hot and cold water. Americans combine them all into one. Where's the logic in that? I'm joking. And while we're on the subject of sinks, most British sinks don't have that sort of food waste disposal thing that you press the button and it does the noise. Amazing. That was one of the best things I discovered after I didn't discover it. Somebody else came up with the idea and I just used it.
So many questions. Sorry I keep pausing this. The two different taps, a cold one and a hot one. What's going on there? Other than waste, maybe it's not as wasteful because one's always hot, so you turn it on instead of us turning the hot one on and waiting a couple seconds for it to actually get hot. And is that very common? Because we just have one. There's no such thing as a hot one and a cold one. That's kind of weird to even think about. And in my Airbnb again, I don't remember there being two separate ones. Interesting. And for the sinks, the waste disposal, you just pour a lot of stuff in the sink, little small bits or something's left of your soup, whatever. A little carrot will go down the drain. You turn the disposal on, and it'll grind it up, and it washes down. Let me know. Let me know.
And it does the noise. Amazing. That was one of the best things I discovered after I didn't discover it. Somebody else came up with the idea and I just used it. But it's amazing. It's just so pleasing to know that all of that gunk gets broken down, and just don't put your hamster in there. I've learned that lesson from someone else. I didn't do it, just read about it on Reddit. Letterboxes. Firstly, Americans don't call them letterboxes, but mailboxes, and typically don't have them on the door, but outside in the garden, yard. The garden/yard is different. Often smaller in Britain, but very well kept up, depending on the family. And just massive yards here with, mesh fences and things like that, or picket fences. Back inside, a lot of properties in the United States will have walk-in closets that are built into the actual walls of the house, whereas in Britain you bring your own closet/wardrobe.
There's one right behind the camera,
and that takes up more space. I've just realized.
In every bedroom we have, I don't know if it's not necessarily a walk-in closet. This house has the master bedroom has everything. It has a walk-in closet. This small room that you walk in with a decent amount of space. You put clothes all around you. Your luggage, your hats, your shoes, your belts, all goes into that walk-in closet. But otherwise, every single bedroom, and you have closets that are within the walls of the home. But if you need more space, you just get, wardrobes and stuff like that.
So we're shooting ourselves in the foot every step of the way. Except when it comes to washing machines and dryers. How cool is this? We combine them both into one giant cube.
That makes
whereas
sense.
America has two separate cubes. And tea drinkers that we are, we love our kettles, don't we? But they're not just any kettles. These are ones you plug in and then hit the switch to turn on the plug, because I forgot to mention that our plug sockets also have switches. And then, you turn it on, don't need a stovetop, and it heats up. Just like that. You've got your water, Bob's your
Very
uncle,
fast.
pour it into a mug. There's your cup of tea. In America, you do have the stovetop kettles, and part of me likes that because it does this really pleasing whistling sound at the end. Now, if you were paying attention during that list, you may have noticed that I touched on some of the terminological differences when it comes to housing in either country. And that brings us on to our final entry.
Great. The words.
It wouldn't be Britain and America if they weren't two countries separated by a common language, and the same is true of the housing world. So let's finish with a rapid fire round looking at those very words. So here in Chicago, I live in a flat, except in America they don't call it flat, it's called an apartment. Something else that you'll find in America though are these condominiums or condos, if you don't fancy saying a word that has condom in it. And we do have those in Britain. They're usually called common hold properties. And I suppose most British people wouldn't go around using that term, whereas you actually hear the term condo quite a lot. It's been suggested to me that I move into a condo, and it sounds good. I mean, when I first heard the term, I thought it sounded like I might be moving onto a lakeside boat or something like that.
A condo.
It is like an apartment, but it's one you would buy. It's real estate. Now, as a child and young adult, I grew up in a house that was known as a semi-detached house. That's when you have a house adjoined to one other house on one side, but not on the other side.
Duplex?
In the United States, this is known quite simply as a duplex, which is not a wrestling move. If it is adjoined on both sides with another house, then you are part of a line of houses that are known as terraced houses in Britain. In America, they're known as row houses because they're all in a row, presumably. Then
I guess not common around where I am. I wouldn't even know what to call those here. I think, you look at San Francisco, you see the kind of those famous pictures from there. That would be a row. They're all just attached and going down these huge hills. We don't really have that. I'm sure we do. But where I'm around, I just can't think of an area that has that.
there's council housing in Britain versus the projects in the United States, and that's just another way of saying public housing. To control the electricity flow in Britain, you have the mains power. In America, you have the grid power. And what if you're sick and tired of the place that you're living in and you just want to relocate somewhere else? In America, you would just simply move. In Britain, you'd move house. And on that note, I'm going to move out to my outro transition because this is the end of the video. Let me know in the comments below if you're watching this from your house right now, or just if you're not. Leave a comment either way. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. A big reminder, by the way, if you want to keep up with me on a day-to-day basis and just see some of the stupid trivia that I come out with, follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS.
That's it. I really like that rapid fire at the end, but that was a great... I like these videos a lot. The differences, and yeah, that they're all true And I like how, yeah, once again, the rapid fire mode at the end of the differences in terms that he was using, the terminology. So from this list, what kind of home are you in? I really love the differences between the two homes. Some things make more sense to me here and other things make more sense over there. For example, washer and dryer. Why can't, like we're always wondering here, even growing up, why can't they just combine them, have one big unit with a washer and dryer? We always have two. Very common here. I don't know if I can name one person with two, or with one washer and dryer combined. It's not a thing here. I'd like to know mainly what you are happy that Britain has or wish that you had that America has, or if you're from the US, the other way around, or stuff that just does not make sense, like why does America blank? Those are when I really enjoy diving into a discussion. Thanks for watching and have a good rest of your day under your roof in your beautiful home in your beautiful country. That was cheesy.